Wow. You are in store for a great week of coverage from Dell Technologies World. Satya Nadella, Pat Gelsinger, Michael Dell, all on the same stage today. And no better guest than Steve Athanas, president of the board.
VMUG president of the board,
interchangeable. Yeah, interchangeable. You know what? There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
First off, let's talk about the announcements from a customer perspective. You're a Dell. I'm imagining you're at the minimum a VMware customer, and you will get into whether or not you're a larger Dell Technologies customer. But as a Dell Technologies customer perspective, what did you think about today's announcements?
I'm really excited, right, for a couple reasons. I think first and foremost, anytime a company is going to give me choice, I'm on board with that, right? And so the announcement about having, multi-cloud, right? And I still haven't gotten all the product names right in my head yet. Right. It's still too new. They're not burned in there.
Dell Technologies Cloud.
Yes. Right, but then isn't there also a VMware Cloud on Dell EMC?
Yes.
Right? And so there's all these different pieces in there. But being able to have a subscription-based model on-premise, have a subscription-based model in Azure, have it in AWS, and being able to choose where the right place to have that workload is for my business, that's really exciting for me, right? And so again, anytime someone's going to give me choice, I'm going to take that choice. And I think that was a big statement today that it's, and I think we saw it in the keynote a lot, was innovation is done by people. Innovation is done by the teams, right? So by enabling that and reducing the friction around it, I think that's huge.
So Michael started out the keynote with talking about not solving big problems, but solving big problems. He was talking about world-changing problems. I've gone to healthcare facilities, education facilities, all over the place, and I see Dell-branded stuff all the time. Yep. I did this really cool tour of a research facility in Oregon. The pathologists had these huge microscopes, and they were connected to Dell Technologies hardware, which was pretty cool. When it comes to this announcement with Microsoft and this announcement with VMware, how do you think that's going to change your business?
So you asked a question earlier, and I'll get to that in just one second. But so we are a reasonably large Dell Technologies customer, right? So we've maintained Dell hardware. Back in the day we had EMC storage, right? And it's all converging now into Dell, right? So we're a pretty big Dell shop. That's our primary strategic vendor. So how is it going to change our business? I think, you talked about solving big problems, right? And so to solve big problems, you have to be focused and you have to be intentional about solving them, right?
Right.
And so what I always tell my team is the less time that our chancellor, president, I work for university, right? Chancellor, president is spending thinking about technology, thinking about IT. The less time that they're thinking, the more time they're thinking about research, teaching, how we're changing pedagogy in the industry, right? That's where we want them to be spending their time. We don't want them to be spending time thinking about IT, so we want to take that off their plate. And a lot of this stuff is all focused on giving IT the tools to do that. To say, don't worry about, how we're going to figure out the capital spend for our servers. Let's just pay the run rate that we need to do to get the job done to focus on our core mission. And anytime IT is taking, sometimes we get glib and call it, table stake stuff, but removing that sort of base layer of effort that we have to spend and allowing our teams to focus on assisting with solving those problems and, building the software and the platforms and the architecture to get the real work of our organizations done, that's all net positive.
So I really love the idea of shrinking the mind share of IT. As an IT person, I don't like to hear that. I mean, I like the fact that IT is this mystery thing and I get paid really well to figure it out. But I think those days are disrupted by AWS, Azure, Google Compute, and Salesforce, and more SaaS-like solutions.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it's being totally disrupted. I think it's changing, right? So like when I got into the industry, now granted I started in desktop support, right? Like a lot of folks did. But we spent a lot of time thinking about, how do we set the dip switches to get the IRQ setting right? And so, That's gone now. Nobody does that, but there's still a need for that tech skill. So I think what happens is we keep moving further up the stack, and we keep doing. I think we apply that engineering mindset to different challenges, and so it's changing, but I don't think it's going away. I think IT people, there's still going to be a strong need for IT talent.
And I think to kind of echo your point, I was at a RPA conference last week, robotic processing automation, where you take, if you have a person who takes something from one screen and copies it to another screen, that's kind of a robotic process.
Absolutely.
There's not a real reason a human being should be doing that work.
Yeah.
And you have a whole cottage industry that has kind of built up around that to automate doing that. And people who are doing the process can get involved in creating the bots to do the process. But more importantly, you free up that person who's doing that was copying text from one screen and putting it into another one to do more interesting stuff.
And be more creative,
and
right?
be more creative.
Yeah, when I was in college, I had a friend of mine who was working in staff augmentation. And they had a position they would always hire for, they called it the chip flip position. And it's true. What they would do is they'd take a wafer of, I don't know if it was silicon or what, but it would come out of machine A, and they'd flip it over, and then they'd put it into machine B. And I thought, how dehumanizing is that labor, right? Like, wouldn't that person rather be doing something that lets them use their mind or creativity or express their passions instead of do this 4,000 times a day, right? And I think we're seeing that in IT, right? I think we all know people. I've had periods of time in my career where it was copying the text and putting it over here, or, wash, rinse, repeat. Let's update server A. Okay, good, updates are good. Let's move to server B and do the exact same process. Okay, that's done. Now let's move to server C. And that's not exciting. That doesn't get you, at least it doesn't get me energized to get out of bed in the morning. But solving problems in education that can transform, our environment and better our society, that does get me out of bed in the morning.
So going back to the announcements from this morning's show, one of the things that if I were a IT individual contributor and I heard the announcements from the stage, I heard Dell, VMware will now manage my on-prem solution. Wow, if I'm a VI admin, what am I going to do next? Like, what's the future? You help lead one of the biggest user groups in the world, and their bread and butter is vSphere. I mean, I help put on the content track for many of the virtual events.
Yep.
And people still love configuring and troubleshooting vSphere sessions.
Sure.
That's not the future of. It's not the future of the VI admin. It's obviously not going to be the future of VMUG.
Yeah, and I agree entirely, right? And so I think if I'm in that role, right, and which I have been for a good portion of my career, for me it's about what's next, right? And I think a lot of that comes to, look, you've got the infrastructure piece that your apps are laying on, right? And so spending time down here, every hour you spend down here is an hour you can't spend up here making sure your apps are well connected, right? Making sure that the data is moving from app to A to app B. You're making informed decisions. And so that's where I would focus my effort and energy, right? And that's different for every organization. It's different for a manufacturing organization than it is for education, than it is for healthcare, right? But moving up that and saying, this is stuff that it's done, right? No different than nobody's messing with dip switches anymore, right?
Exactly.
On our servers, right? Nobody's worried about, where do I put the cable in the server? We've left that. So this is just the next progression of that, at least in my mind, which is let's take our highly skilled, frankly, often well-compensated IT talent and move them to places where they can keep the business moving forward. In some cases, that's going to be, for some people, that's Kubernetes, right, or cloud-native applications. In some cases, it's going to be moving into the apps themselves, right, and there's too many to bother listing off. And in some places, it's going to be, I think, almost becoming more of an economist, right, which is, okay, this workload looks like this and feels like this and usage pattern is this. Which cloud does it belong in, right? Because Dell, I think, is doing doing a lot for us in terms of not needing to get me to worry about how to get it to run on a certain platform. But at the end of the day, I'm still paying for my consumption, right? And that's costed differently in Azure than it is in AWS than it is on premise. So if the goal is to reduce the amount we're spending to get an application to run, I think there's a role for that, being almost an IT economist, right?
And then VI
cloud economist.
And VI admins are already accustomed to doing this.
Exactly.
You know, they understand how much a workload is going to cost to run on an EMC array versus a Hitachi array versus
Yep.
you know, a NAS. They understand the trade-offs of doing that from a technology perspective. So it's just really making a mind shift from, you know, going to dip switches to doing to, you know what, someone else is controlling the dip switches. I can focus on the financial pieces. So some practicals.
Right. And let's be clear, when's the last time a sysadmin or VI admin came up to you and said, you know, I had the most fun yesterday. We had a board blow, and I got to have somebody come in and replace my motherboard while I was worried about moving. You know, nobody has fun doing that stuff anyway.
No one has fun about doing that. You know, Michael made the comment that workloads are going to have to move from one cloud to another. It is the reality. I'm not a fan of moving workloads from one cloud to another, but the reality is that as you give users the raw capability, if I give a user Salesforce access, and if I give him AWS access, he's going to build something I never thought about.
Correct.
And I need to be in a position where I can handle that. I need to learn about the security between the two domains, how I'm going to maintain the security, how I'm going to see how data is going to be, where it needs to be, egress charges leaving AWS to Salesforce. I have to be prepared for kind of the unknowns. We didn't know what was going to happen when we gave users the ability to just plug random USB devices into a computer. And they came up with uses and use cases that we didn't think of, and this is going to be very much the same.
Yeah, we have an electron microscope that has that's a USB. I mean, you know, multi-$100,000 device is a USB peripheral to a when USB was invented, it was like the scanner was the really cool thing that worked on USB, right?
And now we have all these standard interfaces. I guess the fun thing, Michael said that you should be, if you work in technology, you should be the most excited you've ever been in your career, which is a great point. One of the things is there's a lot of change. Yeah. But in the midst of the change, like nothing's really settled. You look at cloud and people say the cloud is the future. You know, using GCP is very different than using AWS, which is very different than doing Azure, which is still very different than vSphere 6.7 update 2.
Right.
So
which is probably, obviously, I haven't had hands-on with it, which is probably different than using VMware Cloud on Dell EMC, right? So here's another one. Yeah.
So a lot of stuff to learn. So people they need outlets for this. Tell us, where can people find VMUG, and how can VMUG help with this career and management journey? Yeah,
that's a great question, and thanks for asking it. So VMUG, the easiest way to find VMUG, if you're not already plugged into VMUG, is vmug.com, right? You can go there, you can join VMUG. We have something like, I want to say over 230 local groups around the world. We're on every continent except Antarctica. If anybody is in Antarctica that's watching and is a vSphere admin, please sign up for VMUG so we can say we have all 7 continents, right? But we're on 6 continents, right? We do over 30 user cons, again, around the world. In fact, you and I were just in Australia.
We were just in Australia. You were pretty busy, too.
Yeah, I was running around a little bit.
I was like, Steve. Okay.
I don't think you were that. I remember you being a lot more tired.
I was quite tired. Yeah.
But you know, so we're in your backyard. Wherever you are, we're in your backyard. And so how can that help your career? I'm the poster child for it, right? So when I'm not much of a child anymore. I'm middle-aged, but I'm the poster middle-aged guy for it, right? You know, when I joined VMUG as a member, I was effectively an entry-level sysadmin. Right? And then I got more interested in VMUG, and I started building more relationships. I started learning more, and I became an engineer. And then I became a leader, and then I became a VMUG leader, right? Volunteer VMUG leader, and then I became a team leader at work, right? And then I, sort of progressed, ended up on the board of directors, and became a director at work. And so you can almost chart my career progression with my VMUG involvement because it gave me a safe place to express myself and practice things that I couldn't practice at work, right? So I got my first taste of public speaking at a VMUG, right? And I was probably terrible at it, right? But that's a lot better being terrible there among people who will support you and encourage you than it is being terrible in front of your executive team trying to pitch a new idea.
Exactly.
Right? So I was able to practice that before I had to do it for real. Same thing with project management. I did that at a VMUG before I did it in the office. So I think VMUG has a lot of ways that you can, expand your career through volunteering at VMUG. But even if you don't want to do that, if you're like, look, I already volunteered with 6 things, I got enough on my plate right now, right? We offer a ton of educational content, a ton of professional development. This year we're doing a professional development webcast series that isn't focused on technology at all. It's focused on strategy and having difficult conversations and all those skills that set you apart in a team of engineers. Right? So I think those are ways that VMUG can help build. And obviously, we're doing the same thing that the rest of the industry is doing. We're building in cloud native content. We're building in network and security content. And so we're moving along just like everybody else is. And so, one of the things I hear when I go to an event is, hey, thanks for having content on NSX or IoT, because I don't get to mess with that in the office. Nobody's ever saying, hey, can you mess with this NSX thing? But I can when I go to a VMUG and I can do a hands-on lab or take the Cloud Network Academy piece. I think that's really important that we expose people to other things besides their sort of daily admin job.
Yeah, and you mentioned cloud native. The VMUG team is getting Kubernetes content. VMware bought Heptio as PKS, so there'll be plenty of content on cloud native, specifically Kubernetes. The world is changing, and Dell Technologies World 2019 is a great example of how technology has changed, how companies as big as Dell have had to navigate change, and as a result, how supporting organizations like VMUG has changed along with it. I truly encourage you to take a look at vmug.com to get more information on VMUG. You can visit thectoadvisor.com on more information on the CTO Advisor. You can follow me on the Twitters at CTO Advisor. Steve, your Twitter handle?
At Steve Athanas, SteveAthanas.
Talk to you next CTO Dose.
Thanks, Keith.